want to kind of walk you through the process of what typically happens, certainly in terms of motor vehicle accident-based rehabilitation. I think it's a parallel in terms of WSIB and a parallel in many respects in terms of long-term disability, folks that are injured or might not be an injury. It could also be a disease process, but oftentimes they're managed in very much the same way, certainly in Ontario and through much of Canada. So prior to the illness or accident, the individual's living, functioning at a certain preconditioned level. And then with the illness onset or injury onset, the functioning plummets. Could be physical, could be cognitive, it could be emotional, it could be all those dimensions. And beforehand, they had been functioning from the work, well, in terms of they're fully independent, typically in terms of their activities of daily living. And presumably, if they had a job at the time, they were at least able to do their essential job tasks in a satisfactory way. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be employed. So we can make that assumption that at some level, if they've been working somewhere for a time, then they were satisfactorily doing the job. Otherwise, the job would have been long gone from their perspective. And they were doing the job from the standpoint of their physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional demands placed upon them. So this is a very common kind of trajectory. So perhaps the person initially might have been, if it's a more serious injury, maybe they had been involved in hospital at first, and then maybe they go to a St. John's Rehabilitation Center, one of the tertiary rehab, provincial-based rehab centers, perhaps made some gains. And then perhaps after that, maybe there'd been a little bit of acute-based, post-acute rehab, maybe an outpatient physiotherapy clinic for a time. And then that clinic discharges the person. And the individual's discharged. No one has taken the time to kind of reevaluate from a holistic perspective where the individual is at. So they're discharged, and then as you can appreciate, going from a daily to several times a week physical rehab program where it's very physically active. There's a gym component to it, exercise component. It's very important, physical conditioning. And then they're discharged, they go home. Or maybe not they go home, but they're no longer living at home. They're no longer going a number of times a week to this rehab clinic. And then they will likely decompensate. They go home and they're probably not exercising the way that they had been. They've probably gone home and now they're starting to get into the TV kind of scene, video game scene, whatever more sedentary kind of approach. They're probably still experiencing some pain. So although they were told no pain, no gain from the standpoint of exercise, there's something about all of us that, when we don't have that kind of structure to push us, especially through pain, oftentimes there's going to be some retrenchment of that. And they might kind of sit and stew for a time, and then perhaps the insurance company saying, well, I think this person can go back to work, so I'm going to send them to an insurer examination, and maybe these folks are really good folks, and they understand the situation. They realize, okay, well, this person has a long way to go until they're able to do their job tasks again, even from the physical perspective. Yeah, they had some rehab, but they've clearly kind of decompensated over time. So we're going to recommend another trial of like a work conditioning program this time. Person goes back in the work conditioning program, and then 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later are discharged, and the same thing happens. They go back home to sit and stew. And this is a very, very common scenario, not just from the standpoint of physical rehab, but the same thing can be happening from the psychological standpoint. Maybe somebody who did have a post-traumatic stress disorder or panic disorder from the get-go, was well recognized, well treated, and let's say it was more moderate, and then let's say the treating psychologist made some really good gains with the individual, sufficient to either discharge them outright or put them kind of on a maintenance program. And then, boom, this individual then is dropped from the standpoint of any further rehab at that point in time. No one's picking up the pieces. So I think you're starting to get the picture. Now, what if? What if, on the other hand, there were clear measurement points? measurement points that we could actually see how the individual was progressing relative to this line here. And if there were a measure here and we could see that this individual had been making good progress, but then they were discharged and things stopped. Each of these measurement points are opportunities to reflect upon what the individual's needs are from a very broad perspective, potentially. Do they have psychological issues that need to be addressed? Are there cognitive issues that have never been raised and addressed? Are there still ongoing physical issues that the person really should, maybe it means a different intensity, different type of physical treatment, a work conditioning, work hardening program? None of this is occurring to really tell us along these measurements what are the patient or client's needs.